Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Jeon, Product Manager of Connectivity Services, and I'm joined by my colleague Madhav. Today, we'll be presenting our connectivity roadmaps and updating you on recent connectivity highlights. Last quarter, as you can see, we had a number of new items that were delivered. I'm not going to dive into all of them, but I would like to point out a few, starting with Secure Listen, which once enabled, allows any supported connector listener to run on Atom Clouds. This is a feature that can be configured by the cloud admin, and we're targeting the end of this week actually to enable that on our own Boomi clouds. The Azure Service Bus and Salesforce Platform Events connectors have always behaved this way in that they're able to run on Boomi clouds, and this is due to some exceptions we had made internally. But now this can extend to other connectors such as Kafka, Oracle EBS, our new Solace Pub Sub Plus connector, and more to come, as you'll see from Madhav's connector roadmap. So moving on to Boomi OSS. Back in April, we launched our open source initiative that allows connector developers to share their connector code publicly. We have just recently created a new process to submit connectors to host on our open source repository, where you can either submit your code through a pull request or provide a URL, and then we'll review and set you up with your own repo and make you an admin. And that way you can merge any contributions as necessary. I'd also like to highlight the new early access and tech preview program that was launched just a couple weeks ago. So early access connectors are connectors that are still in the development phase or have not yet been released publicly. We'd like to put this out there for customers because there may be a feature or technology that our customers waiting for, and providing early access to the connector or the new feature gives a more immediate path forward for the customer, and also gives us a great feedback loop, which ultimately allows us to build a better product. And speaking of tech preview, in the October release, we'll have a number of connectors that will be going GA. And to get a full list, check out the October release notes. I also briefly mentioned the new Solace Pub Sub Plus connector. If you'd like to know more about it, we have a session during Boomi Out of This World episode 3 that includes an entire demo on this connector. So moving on to the connectivity services roadmap. As you can see, we're making even more updates to Secure Listen with load balancing and automated failover. We also have begun development on our Open API connector that will be able to almost automatically support applications based on the consumption of valid Open API specs. And as you can see in the up next column, we'll be using the Open API connector as a foundation for a generator for application connectors. Going back to in progress, we're also continuing work on fully supporting key value pairs, which the base functionality was initially released in Q2. So we're adding support with extensions, as well as support for being able to override the properties that come from the key value pair component. Next item, I had mentioned checking out the Solace Pub Sub Plus connector during Out of This World episode 3, but we also have another great demo on building a custom connector using the SDK. So if you're interested in building your own connector, or even wondering why you should consider building one, the session is definitely for you. For the next 2 columns, I'm sort of going to jump around, but the themes are one around supporting a better user experience for connectors when building with the SDK, and also better tooling for connector developers. We've gotten resounding feedback from connector developers that in order to provide a better experience for their users, the SDK should implement some ways to organize fields rather than only having a long list that may or may not be needed based on configurations. So you'll see that we have coming up support for conditional fields, which should make configuring connectors more intuitive for the users. So the connector can show or not show additional fields based on previous selections. There's also plans to support grouping for fields, which is an obvious way to organize your panels. Sticking with the SDK, we also have on the roadmap multi-step browse. So our browse feature can support making multiple API calls to get to the desired object or profile. This isn't the only use case for multi-step browse, but it's probably the one that comes up most often. We're also planning to create a deployment API for connector developers so that testing and deploying connector versions can be automated, and that will save a lot of time and effort during development of a connector. We'll also be putting efforts towards connector management. So once a connector is developed and uploaded to the platform, it'll be much easier to organize your connector groups, versions, submissions, etc. We're actually launching a survey to get feedback and requests on what features should be added or enhanced. So if you are a connector developer or someone who manages connectors on the developer tab, please keep your eye out for this questionnaire on that page, the developer tab, and take a moment to fill it out because your comments will be very crucial in providing the best new experience for connector management. That's all for connectivity services. I'm passing off to Madhav on the connectors roadmap. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Madhav, the PM for connectors. Today, I'd like to share with you a few highlights from our connectors roadmap. We actually have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Starting in the left, in progress, there are several exciting new connector development going on. Starting with Salesforce REST connector. This connector provides you a powerful and convenient way to interact with the Salesforce Lightning platform. You also get the benefit of ease of integration and development with the REST APIs. And of course, it also supports bulk API v2, which is optimized for large data sets as well. Moving on to Oracle EBS 12.2 v2 release 1. We're actually rewriting the EBS connector to support both PL/SQL and REST APIs. What that means to you is you get best of both worlds. And if you're using the existing connector, which supports 11.x integrations, you can continue to use that, but also plan around migrating to 12.2 APIs and REST infrastructure. In this first release, we plan on supporting Oracle AQ and DB/C file authentication as well within the connector. Moving on to Amazon Redshift. Similar to certified branded Snowflake connector that we are launching in a couple of weeks, and also a plug for the out of the world, there is an excellent demo that we've created where we showcase Snowflake along with SAP and Salesforce and DCP platform on how to manage your large data sets and be able to get business insights. Please do check it out. Similar to that connector, Amazon Redshift connector is also being developed that enables you to load, extract, and query petabytes of structured and semi-structured data across your data warehouse. Moving on to Salesforce CDC connector, we are adding that capability that will enable you to receive near real-time changes that happen within Salesforce. And it also allows you to synchronize corresponding records in an external data store. So you can use this feature to update data in an external system automatically instead of manually doing this periodically by exporting and importing data. Lastly, in the new connector development, Oracle Database Connector. This is a connector first of its kind. We have a generic database connector already, and we are building a new version of that generic database connector, which is going to launch very shortly. And based on top of that, we are building a specific Oracle native connector that leverages the Oracle drivers. What that means to you is that it gives you the benefit of things like var arrays and nested tables and upserts and things like that that are very Oracle specific functionality. Moving on to the connector updates section in progress. We are adding connection and read timeouts to three connectors: OData, Dynamics 365, Finance and Operations, and Customer Engagement connectors. And what that means to you is your processes don't have to wait indefinitely or have to write some custom scripting to manage timeouts or endpoints not being available. That can be managed through the connector timeout settings as well. We're enhancing the JMS 2.0 connector to support different types of queues, example, ActiveMQ, Oracle AQ, and so on. In addition to that, we're also adding XML type payload support for JMS 2.0. We're adding listen capability to several connectors. As you've been probably following, we started adding that a couple of quarters ago. Salesforce platform events went out in August, and now it supports no duplicate messages and so on. We're also going to extend that listen capability for SAPE in the public clouds. And similarly, we're going to be adding that to RabbitMQ shortly. We're also adding OAuth 2.0 authentication mode for IMAP connector. Several other enhancements are also planned. I definitely don't want to go into every one of these, but SFTP is one I just want to call out. We are adding some powerful file naming structure definitions within the operation so that it enables you to have real-time transactional files that can be very unique, even if you have microsecond, like multiple files being written to the destination target. You can manage that through a very complex file naming structure configuration within operations. Within the in progress column, lastly, in the open source front, we plan to open source Microsoft Teams, SFDC REST, and DBV2 connectors as well this quarter. Moving on to the up next column, SAP S/4HANA Cloud. So this connector is planned for in the next few months. We'll be developing that. The connector enables you to operate and manage big data use cases. It also helps you connect multiple business entities within the organization, and it facilitates better internal coordination among teams and data. We also plan to launch Postgres, SQL, and SAP HANA databases along the lines of Oracle DB connector. So these two will be, in addition to that, Oracle DB connector, very specifically using Postgres drivers, not the generic JDBC drivers, similarly SAP HANA drivers. So you can expect to really leverage the platform endpoint functionalities that you may not get with a generic JDBC driver. Also on the roadmap is Azure Data Lake Storage Connector. With the ADLS connector, you can eliminate data silos and enable getting real-time business insights. Oracle EBS 12.2 Release 2 is also planned in the coming quarters. And that will extend the Release 1 by making things like XML gateway, business events, and stuff like that. Some other advanced features that can help you manage the integrations better with Oracle EBS. In connector updates, we plan on updating Great Plains connector with the most recent APIs, and also continuing to add real-time capabilities to every connector that can actually take that listener capability. So in that line, we're adding listener functionality to Disqui2, Salesforce platform events in the public clouds, Kafka, RabbitMQ in the Atom clouds as well in the next few months. Enhancements are planned for Azure Service Bus, OData, and DBV2 connector as well. We'd like to support. We already have a DBV2 version coming up. Definitely encourage everyone to check that out as soon as it is available in the early access forum that Lisa was talking about. It has dynamic runtime queries, upside operation that you don't have in the legacy connector. And on top of those, we're also going to be adding a few more nice enhancements to the DBV2 connector. Lastly, in the open source front, we plan to open source Salesforce CDC and Redshift connectors as well that are in development right now. Finally, moving on to the plan section. Won't go into all the items here. There are quite a few, but just wanted to call out that there's a few connectors that I called out that are in plan. Okta, Zendesk, a brand new Workday connector that is revamped. Not actually just extending the current Workday connector, but a new one. And also adding on to the native database connectors portfolio, MySQL connector is in plans. And lastly, SAP C4C connectors are also planned. Connector updates, Sage API updates are going to happen, and also ability for you to do custom SOAP headers is also planned in the next couple of quarters. And adding to the listener capabilities, we'll be adding listener to SFTP and Amazon SQS connectors. And in the OSS front, we plan to add Postgres SQL. And that sort of will wrap up our first initial release of database native connectors, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and SAP HANA. And Azure Data Lake storage connector also will be added to open source. So that will really bring our open source repository up from the last time I reported to you, we had about 6 connectors. Now it's already 12, and we'll probably end up with like 18 or 20 connectors in the open source. Really encourage everyone to go to bitbucket.org/official Boomi, check out open source connectors, fork them, go crazy. We have big plans to make it easier for you to discover connectors, enriched process samples that really apply to your business cases, not just samples that talk about functionality, but how they really apply to your business use cases. Also, I'll bring together the knowledge base articles, all those right within the context that you're working in, whether it's in the Connect tab within Atomsphere or on boomi.com webpage. The goal, of course, is to really make it easier for process developers to start the process, get all the information they need where they need it, and build the process as fast as possible. So please stay tuned for some of the updates along the Project White Whale initiative. Lastly, before I sign off, I want to call your attention to something that Lisa called out earlier. Please do go to Early Access and Tech Preview Forum that we launched a couple of weeks ago. It's now available for everybody on community.boomi.com. You can go ahead, sign up for early validation of connector functionality. You get access to new features. You can be part of our product development lifecycle because together we can build much better products. And also be able to participate in connector forum discussions, check out the facts, and post any ideas that you have as well right within the connector specific forum. Thanks for your time, and that ends up my connector update. With that, I'll now hand it over to Richard to talk about Master Data Hub.